The purpose of this summit is to help liberate the minds of those who have been captive by white supremacy and provide strategies and tools to decolonize our minds, providing a roadmap for our collective liberation. Happy Sabbath. My name is Dr. Sidney Freeman Jr., and welcome to the Decolonizing the Black Mind virtual summit. It is my prayer and hope that you are inspired and changed by what you hear on tonight. What's been amazing is the start of the summit. Yesterday, we had two powerful speakers, Dr. Tiffany Llewellyn, who talked about decolonizing our minds from the psychological perspective, and Pastor Lola Moore Johnston, who talked about decolonizing our churches. The depth and quality of their presentation was second to none. And so today will be no exception. The quality of today's presentations will definitely inspire you. I would ask you now to post in the comments in the chat section where you are watching from. So just go to the chat and comment sections and post where you are viewing from. And happy Sabbath again to each of you. Another thing you guys can do is please share the link. If you're on Facebook, please start a watch party. Share that link. Also, you can do that if you're watching by YouTube. Please share that link with your family and friends. They will not want to miss today's presentations. They will be blessed by what's going to happen on tonight. Some other housekeeping things that I would ask you to do is go to my Facebook page by going to facebook.com/Sidney Freeman Jr. and join our new community that we're building, the Liberation Movement community. Please go to my Facebook page, facebook.com/Sidney Freeman Jr. and go to the group, and in particular, look for the group that is labeled the Liberation Movement Community. Another thing you could do is subscribe to my YouTube page. If you just go to YouTube and put in Sidney Freeman Jr. And subscribe to my page, I would really appreciate that. You'll find that we have close to 30 original videos that you can access that deals with this whole concept of decolonizing our minds, and I'm sure you will be blessed. Well, we have some people on here. We have some people from Madison, Alabama. Thank you, Jacqueline. We have some people all the way from St. Croix, Virgin Islands. Catherine, welcome, and we're glad that you're here. Another thing that we want to bring to your attention is that we actually have a website for the Liberation Movement that I want you to access. We have several resources that I think that you would enjoy. One being that we have a book list of close to 100 books related to decolonizing our minds and Black theology. So if you go to drsidneyfreemanjr.com, you can access those resources. drjr.com is where you can access those resources. Click on the top tab that is entitled Liberation Movement, and you can access those resources. I'm not going to do a lot of selling on tonight, but I did want to mention that we do have a T-shirt that we are selling that will go to support this ministry. We are providing the quality of this ministry free of charge. We wanted to make sure that that anyone could have access to this material and to this ministry, but it does cost. And so we would ask you to go to my website and make a donation so that we can continue to have this kind of high quality video presentations. So without further ado, we'll go to our first presenter.
Dr. Courtney Ray is a clinical psychologist and ordained minister of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. She is president of the Society of Black Neuropsychology, and she'll be speaking with us on the topic of decolonizing into service.
Hello and good evening, everyone. I'm so happy that I get a chance to come and to share sort of my story with you guys. When Dr. Freeman told me about this great series, one of the things that he asked me to do was to share my story of moving from church-sponsored ministry into private practitionership, which is what I do. I am a licensed clinical neuropsychologist. And as you heard in the introduction, I'm also an ordained pastor, and that is actually my first profession. And just a little bit about my background. I come from a family who lives in New York City. My family is not Adventist. And for a little while, it kind of was something that I lamented. But as we get to the end of my story, you'll see how in some ways it has been a blessing for me in being able to follow the leading of God. When I first went to seminary, I was not sponsored. For those of you who are not familiar with how ministry within the Adventist Church works, you can go to seminary and have the church organization actually pay for your tuition and give you room and board so that you don't have to incur those costs as you get your degree. And then the expectation is that after you graduate, you'll have a guaranteed job within the denomination. I did not have the benefit of that sponsorship when I was in seminary. And so I paid out of my own pocket. And when I graduated, I didn't have a job within the organization. And I even told people, I don't mind not being sponsored because I don't necessarily want the denomination to ever feel like they own me. And I know that a lot of people probably thought, of course you say that, because somebody who doesn't have a sponsorship would say that just to make themselves feel better. But that really was my idea. I never wanted anyone, any organization or institution to feel like I belong to them, as opposed to the fact that my ministry belonged to God. And that wasn't to say that I would never want to or would never accept the opportunity to work for the church organization. But it was always in the forefront of my mind that working for an institution is not the same as working for God. And I think that is something that has helped me as I have transitioned to different phases of ministry. Eventually, I worked at Miracle Temple Church in Maryland, in Baltimore, Maryland, where I loved the people who I worked with for 3 years. I had worked with at Net 2004 with Walter Pearson, and then later on with Pastor Freddie Russell. And then after 3 years there in Baltimore, I wound up going to California, to Fresno, to Central California. And I worked as a chaplain and a Bible teacher, and also as a senior pastor at a church in Central California Conference. And that was kind of the first time that I sort of felt the pull of people wanting to direct my ministry. Where I was as a chaplain in that community, there were people who were very conservative and there were people who were very liberal, and they all sent their children to the school. And so everyone wanted to be very directive in the way that I would teach the classes and the way that I would conduct ministry at that school. And so there was a definite split in the pull and tug of that ministry position. Later on, I wound up going to Southern California Conference. And while I was there, I was able to have some great people that I worked with. Again, wonderful churches, Tamarind Avenue Church, Breath of Life Church, lovely churches. I actually got ordained in the Southern California Conference, and that was a blessing to be with all of the congregations that I worked with. And the ministerial director who was there, my region director. So this is sort of the supervisor for those of you who, again, might not be acquainted with church politics. This is the person who is sort of your direct supervisor in the larger organization. The person that I had the privilege of working with for the longest period of time was Dr. Anthony Kelly. And he was a man who really believed in Black empowerment. He definitely believed in allowing people to shine and to thrive. And he had his DMin, and he was actually working towards getting a second doctorate. And he told me very specifically, he said, you know what? You ought to make sure that you have another venue, not just here. And this is something that I had heard many times before, because in denominational work, you're sort of at the behest of whoever you are. You might have someone who is a great supervisor that you work with, or ministerial leader, or conference president that you work with. But all it takes is someone who kind of, to use a biblical phrase, who knows not Joseph, to come in and who might have a different perspective on things, and for whatever reason might not feel that they want you there, that they can make things very difficult for you. And particularly for women in ministry, there is still a lot of sexism. There's still a lot of just antagonistic relationships within our denomination towards women in ministry. And so his very astute advice to me was, you really should make sure that you have something else that you are able to do, even beyond church work. And I thought about that, and where I wanted to focus my energies was working in ministry in psychology. And part of that is because what I saw among my colleagues, among other pastors and ministers, is that there was a lot of depression, there was a lot of anxiety, there were a lot of marital stresses, there were lots of things that were going on that they didn't have anyone to turn to. And this is very common with people who are in any type of helping professions. And especially if you are in the helping profession where people are always coming to you and believe that you know what the best thing to do is, you might not necessarily feel comfortable or even know where to go when you are under distress yourself. And so one of the things that I really wanted to do was to provide psychological and mental health help for people who are in the ministry, also for people who are church members. A lot of my church members would come to me for pastoral counseling, but their problems were beyond the scope of what I was able to do. And I would try to refer them out to other people, and they would be very resistant to that because of negative connotations with mental health professions and things like that. And so I decided, well, if I can't refer them out to someone else, then I can be that person for them. And I went to get my doctorate, and Dr. Kelly had said, well, why don't you go and you ask the conference whether or not they will pay for you for this. And I remember talking to one of the executives of the conference, and they said, you know what, we don't pay for anything except for a Master's of Divinity or a DMin, because if we give you the opportunity to get another degree, then what we have found is that people will leave. And so it was it was not covert in the way that the person told me this. This was very plain and simple. And they gave me names of people who, this person got their doctorate and they left us. This other person, they went to another conference. And so there was a genuine fear that if we help you to become more or to level up in your skills in any way, that you would outgrow us and you would want to leave. And that was never my intention. It had always been my intention to use my giftedness within the confines of my particular conference. So since they weren't going to help me, I wound up paying for it out of my pocket myself. When I did that, it just so happens that towards the end of my doctorate, Dr. Anthony Kelly passed away. And we got a new ministerial director, and we got a new conference president. And, you know, there again, prophecy is what it is, right? So there was someone who wasn't really particularly happy with having a woman in ministry, and there was a lot of antagonistic relationships or antagonistic situations that happened there. And I don't want to get into that and belabor that point, but towards the end, I only had a few months left. This individual said, why are you even doing a doctorate? And so there was a big meeting. It's actually crazy, where the executive committee of my conference was just like, well, who told you that you could get a degree in something else? And, I let them know, well, this was something that I talked about with Dr. Kelly, before this other person came, and, and there was a lot of friction in that meeting. There are two things that I remember distinctly that made a turn in the desire of where I would go, in the direction that I would go. One person said, do you want to be a psychologist or do you want to be a pastor? And I remember replying, well, I don't think that you necessarily have to make it a dichotomous decision, because I believe that there is value in mental health being a part of pastoral ministry. And another person says, well, what if we don't see any value in it? And it was that moment that I recognized exactly what I had feared, the whole idea that an institution might think that they had the rights or the ownership of my life, my direction, my calling, my ministry, and that the idea that I would not be able to do the things that God called me to, that God directed me to, or God led me to, unless the individuals who were in supervisory roles also caught that same vision. So unless God's vision came through them, there would be a hindrance to me. Like I said, I had no intention of ever leaving my post at my conference, but I had always promised myself that I would always be working for God, and that would not necessarily always mean working for the institution. And I don't want anybody to get it twisted. It's not any antagonism towards the institution, but the understanding that those two things are not always synonymous, and that ministry can happen in several different ways. I know that Dr. Freeman asked me to kind of share some practical road maps to how to transition from pastoral ministry to something else. But I think that it's really important for people to first get the mental roadmap before I give you any kind of details in terms of practical steps. Because unless you are unbound from the mental lots that are confining you, you will never take that next step. Because one of the things that really holds a lot of people back is the idea that they are fearful of moving out into doing something else. And I think that fear, more than anything else, is what hinders people from fully doing the things that they need in their giftedness. So what do I mean? Number one, I think that the whole idea of our institution is one that allows people to believe that we are big fish in a small pond. And Adventism is wonderful, and I am a faithful Adventist. I believe in the Adventist message. However, our theology is such that we promote the idea that we are the remnant, so that if you are part of the Adventist church, you are part of the remnant. If you are not part of the Adventist church, you are not part of the remnant, and that is not biblical. There are people who are going to be in the remnant who are not part of our church, and unfortunately, there are going to be people who are members of our church who are not going to be part of the remnant. And that means that those two things aren't synonymous. But we kind of have cultivated this mindset that our church, the coming of Christ, rises and falls on whatever the Adventist church does. And so that idea that we are that important in Earth's history means that being a part of this church, and particularly being a leader in this church, is something that is hyper important. And it can be almost quixotic in a way to be a leader and a pastor in such an institution that has this idea of self-aggrandizement. And so the idea of stepping away from that can feel very scary because you are leaving behind something that you have believed has been very integral in the entire history and prophecy of the world. And so that idea is kind of scary, to say that you're going to voluntarily leave that. And like I said, my family not being Adventist, I think, has given me the ability to kind of see the perspective that the world is larger than Adventism, that God is larger than Adventism, that ministry is larger than working just for one denomination in one specific place. And so pastoral ministry within the Adventist church is not the only definition of what it means to be a minister. There are so many other larger things that God is able to do through us in order to bless people and to evangelize the world. And so knowing that, I think, is the first step in being free, and saying that leaving a pastoral position is not leaving ministry, it's not leaving God, it's not betraying my calling, none of those things. I think also there is fear to reputation, because, because there is such a hype in that position of being a pastor, many people don't leave it. We know people who are in their 80s, 90s who stay in pastoral ministry until the day they die. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. Some people just really love it and embrace it that much. They can't see themselves doing anything else. There are some people who can't afford to, because we don't have a great retirement system. And then there are some people who hold on to it because this is the only thing that they know how to do. And so the idea that people would voluntarily leave is kind of odd. And so there is a fear that people might look at you, and I'm just going to be real, because I've had these conversations with my colleagues, and they think, well, what if somebody thinks because I left that I did something wrong? Because that's usually the idea. Like, if somebody leaves, they must have had something wrong with the tithes or the thighs. They did something with the money or the honey. And so they're getting kicked out instead of voluntarily leaving. And so there's the idea that someone might think badly of their reputation if they left. The other thing is that if they leave, what about their friends and their families? Because Adventism is a microcosm. It is a subculture where people have their families and their churches and their work lives and their church lives, and everything about their social network is bound up into this network. And so leaving that, there's a real fear that you might have friends who might not want to be your friends anymore. And there are some people who might think that if you leave pastoral ministry, that you're leaving the church, that you're leaving the faith, that you're leaving Jesus. And it's none of those things. And so you have to now first mentally overcome the fact that you need to understand the church is not the totality of ministry. The church is not the totality of God. The church is not the totality of what you can do in your calling. And the second thing is to understand that it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about you. It's okay for you. You need to be determined in your mind to do whatever God has asked you to do. And, if other people say whatever they're going to say, or if somebody doesn't want to be your friend anymore or anything like that, that's okay. Because there are some people who are very addicted to that position and that power. And it's really crazy to even think about. But once you leave that, there are some people who won't want to be your friends anymore, or won't want to be connected to you in that way anymore. And that is a real fear that some people may have. So the idea that we as pastors really have a broader ministry and a broader calling than just being in a congregation is one that really is difficult to overcome, and one that purposefully is put in place in a way that keeps us wanting to only do this. And so once you finally break out of that mindset, I think that it becomes significantly easier for you to say, if I know that this is not the only way that I can serve, if I understand that this is not the only way that I can be a minister, then that means that literally the sky is the limit to what God can do. And that is the other thing that I would just say, that whatever you do, just make sure that it is God focused and God centered. I do love working for myself, and I do love not having to make sure that all of my ministry ideas go through 1,000 different committees before I implement them, because I still do ministry, still do freelance work, I still do preaching, I still do teaching, I still write, I still actually do the exact thing that I went to school for in my first purpose, which was to help other pastors to learn about mental health, to help them develop mental health ministries in their congregation. I do all of those things, and I had to do those things in a way that was different than the path that I thought that I would do it. But it was always whatever God wants me to do. If God wants me to ever go back to working for the denomination, I don't think that that's what God wants me to do. I've had offers and I have not heard the voice of the Lord say yes. And so, but I will never tell the Lord that I'm not going to do it. But just understanding that whatever I do, I have to be open to what God leads me to do. That is really important, to say that wherever God leads me, I'm going to go and walk in a way that I'm not in fear. So once you figure out what it is that God is asking you to do, in addition to whatever pastoral ministry that you might be doing, I would encourage you to first seek out the path that you need to take in order to do that. So for instance, I am doing psychology. I'm doing a very specialized type of psychology as well. And in doing that, I had to find out, how do I go to school for this? What are the different training steps for this? What is the way that I can do this path? And understanding kind of the totality of that scope of that roadmap was really important before I even started. And it was a little daunting, I will say, because when I first began, I said, wow, this program is going to take 5 to 6 years. And, I was lamenting to a friend, I'm going to be, this much older by the time I graduate. And my friend was like, well, you're going to be that much older in 5 to 6 years anyway. So you can either be that old with a degree or you can be that old without a degree. And I said, you know what? That is true. And so I decided that, hey, if this is what God wants me to do, then I'm going to go full steam ahead for it. I wound up using, like I said, my money, my own salary to fund my education. It would have been nice if I had gotten a scholarship or some other way of doing that. But, things worked out the way that they did, that I was able to pay for myself in doing that. And then embracing the different ways that I could, after I got my degree, that I could use that. So knowing exactly who I needed to go to and who was doing something similar to what I wanted to do. And I think that that's really important as well. Finding someone who you can connect to, who can be a mentor to you, to help you in doing what you want to do. I've had friends of mine who, after I left, who were like, how did you do this? And I was very happy to help them. A lot of my friends have gone into leadership. So they do sort of leadership coaching. And I have a number of friends who had done that before. And so I was able to connect my friends who were just coming into that field with people who have been experienced with it before. And so if you don't know someone who's doing what you want to do, find someone else who knows someone who does what you want to do, so that you can make those connections. I think that's really important, to have mentorship, no matter what you do. Even if you are still in pastoral ministry forever, you should have a good mentor. You should have somebody who you're talking to. You should have colleagues as well, who are peer-to-peer people who you can talk to and bounce ideas off of. I think counting the cost is really important. The career that I have now is one that I can sustain myself pretty well with. And I think that that's also really important, especially if you are the primary breadwinner for your household, or maybe you are someone who doesn't know exactly how much you might be making if you're doing something independent. Really trying to understand and get a grasp on, okay, what realistically would be the amount that I would need in order to self-sustain myself. And that does not mean, and the idea of transitioning from pastoral ministry to something else doesn't necessarily mean completely leaving pastoral ministry and doing this other thing and not doing anything with ministry anymore. Like I said, it doesn't mean leaving ministry. It doesn't mean leaving the church. It doesn't mean leaving Adventism. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means saying that I'm going to do this other thing. And you can, for a time, maybe do both things at the same time. And actually, I did do some psychological work at the same time as I was doing my pastoral ministry, because I was able to balance those things well. And you need to be honest with yourself as to what you can balance, how many obligations you have that can be pulling on you in different directions that may or may not make that feasible for you, but making sure that you have a game plan and giving all of it to God, and saying that I'm not going to be fearful of whatever this might be, even if it might be a little bit scary, if I believe and I trust that God is going to show me what I need to do. And if God is really calling me to this, then I need to really believe that I can give myself to this fully and wholeheartedly, and God will bless it. So right now I have a private practice. And like I said, I do have a component of that where I teach pastors about mental health, and I teach congregations about starting a mental health ministry for their own churches. And that was something that I did adjunctly with my actual practice. And also originally when I first stepped out, I was like, okay, I'm going to teach because I know I can teach, and I know I can get an income from that, and I can make some money doing that, and I can sustain myself doing that. And I did that while I built my practice. And it actually didn't take that long from the time that I began teaching to the time I actually took the leap to start my practice, to then actually doing it in a way that I don't necessarily have to teach anymore. I still do. I am a teacher for the City University of New York, and I do that in conjunction with my ministry and with my practice. But those are things that I found one thing that I could do and do it very well, one kind of tent pole, and then moved on to add other things that might have needed a little bit more nurturing before I moved on completely to doing these other things. And I think that that's really important too. You might feel that the Lord is leading you to just, take the leap, sell all your possessions, and just go out in the wilderness and start whatever you're going to do. Hey, if God is calling you to do that, who am I to tell you not to? But I will just say that for me, the idea of having something that I could kind of depend on, and then kind of easing into a different phase and transitioning in that way, was a little easier for me, just in terms of maybe my courage, and then also financially, I was able to take some of that money from the thing that I was getting my primary income from, so teaching, and investing that into my practice and investing that into my ministry, so that those things could be sustained by this other thing. And so I just really want to encourage everyone who is listening that whatever it is that God has asked you to do, if you feel that this is a calling on your life, don't be encumbered by the fear of your own inadequacies, because if God has called you, then God will give you the ability to fulfill that calling. And I also don't want you to have a fear of what other people may say, because you know what? There were lots of people who, like I said, after I left, who started calling me and say, hey, how did you do this? So you know what? There are going to be people who might kind of give you a side eye at first, but I guarantee those people are going to be calling you, emailing you, writing you, trying to pick your brain after you make whatever transition you're going to do. So don't even worry about that. And then lastly, and I think most importantly, just really understand that what God has given us in terms of ministry is just so broad. It's just so astronomically huge that it cannot be just confined to just one single type of ministry, one single type of position. I really want us to understand that ministry is so much bigger than a denomination. It's so much bigger than the church. I'm telling you. So Marquis said, how did I do it? And so, like I said, what I did was I actually decided, hey, I can't do this I cannot just leave myself in this small container. I can't just do that. And so I looked up Loma Linda, that was close by me. And I decided, I counted the cost. I said, this is how much it would be. If I want to be a psychologist, this is how I need to do it. So I took, like I said, I took my salary from while I was pastoring. I put it into my tuition so that I could actually learn the skill sets that I needed while I was still pastoring, and got my degree while I was pastoring. And I think that everyone who is a pastor needs to do that. I think no matter what you do, even if you do decide to stay in ministry, you should have a secondary avenue that you have cultivated so that you are not dependent on the church for your income. Because like I said, you may love your administration right now. You might have a wonderful ministerial secretary, a great president, all of those things. But all it takes, because of the capricious nature of our denomination and the way that we are structured, all it takes is somebody who, you know, for whatever reason, does not feel the same vibe that you have. And you might find yourself in a situation where that is an uncomfortable place for you to be. And you don't want your only ability, your only source of income to be this church. And you don't want to just stay there simply because you have no other options. If you stay in ministry, stay there because you love it. Stay there because you feel welcome in that environment. Stay there because this was some place that you feel that God wants you to be. Don't stay in a place simply because you feel like you have no place else to go and you have no other options. Never, ever put yourself in a position where you are beholden to someone else and you can't make another decision for yourself, where you have no other option. You never want to do that. You always want to be able to say, I have another path, that God has given me talents. Everyone has talents. Everyone has more than just one. And if God has given you the ability to preach, he's given you the ability to do something else too. Invest your talents in other places. Invest your ministry prowess in different areas. Because I know some fantastic preachers who are still in ministry and who write books, or they give seminars, or they do other things. And those are also ways in order to make sure that they are never confined to just one avenue in ministry because they don't have anyone else. And so it's really important that we always make sure that we are saying, God, I have sown cast my bread upon many waters so that I have a lot of different avenues just in case God decides to lead you to another path and to give you another place where you can minister at instead. And so, like I said, I did that. I got that degree. And once I did that, I found a mentor. I found several mentors. I found people who were they might not have been doing exactly what I wanted to do, but they were doing something that was similar enough that I could say, and I could ask, like, hey, how did you do that? And don't be ashamed of asking. Don't be ashamed of saying, I don't know how to do this. Starting over is scary. Doing something that you've never done before is terrifying. I mean, for me, I had been out of school for I don't know how long before I went back to school for Loma Linda. I was just like, wow. I mean, I have always been the youngest person in my class. And so going back to school after so long, I was like, oh my goodness, now I'm one of the oldest people in my class. And it was scary. But you know what? I had the confidence to know that God wanted me to do this. So if that's what the Lord wanted me to do, the first day, I'm not even gonna lie, I sat and I cried. I went to class and I was like, I've been out of this for so long. And then I left the classroom because I think I got lost going to the class and all this other kind of stuff. And so I got there late and I was just so embarrassed. And then I just cried. I didn't let anybody see me cry, but I cried for a long time. And I was like, I shouldn't even be doing this. And God said, if I called you to do this, if I have put this in your heart, then you can be sure that I will see you through it. And by God's grace, I was able to graduate. And, and right now I'm the president of the Society for Black Neuropsychology. It's an international organization for Black leaders in neuropsych. And that's a huge deal. That's something that I would never have thought that I would do. And I'm not saying that to brag for myself, because this is a position that it's not going to be forever. I don't know where God wants to take me next or what's going to be after this, but the idea that I can't foresee what God wants me to do, but I have to be faithful enough to say, I'm willing to put my hand in your hand and go wherever you lead. And I'm just going to close with this. I remember when I was in Southern California Conference, I was with one of my colleague pastors and with Elder Patey, who is also passed away. He was the principal of Los Angeles Adventist Academy. And I remember this pastor said, you know what, Courtney, you're going to be like a conference president one day. And Elder Patey said, no, I don't think so. And I was like, well, dang, well, why are you going to say that, Elder Patey? And he's like, I think God has something more for you. And I don't think that you should limit yourself to just that. And I said, wow, and the idea that sometimes we limit ourselves in what God could do for us because we believe that this is the thing that we are needing to aspire to. This thing is the pinnacle of what we need to do. And God said, I don't even want you to be in, you're not even going to be in that system. I'm going to put you someplace else totally. And just being willing and open to do that and not be afraid of where that might lead. So I hope that I answered the questions. If there are more specific questions, please do ask. If I haven't answered something very specific that you wanted to know, then I will be happy to elaborate. But I hope, Dr. Freeman, that was helpful.
Yeah, I think you're freeing people tonight. You're freeing some people tonight. This was major. I have some questions we can start out with, but I know it's going to take off with questions. So one of the things that I've heard from my colleagues that are in pastoral ministry is this fear of debt, right? So this fear of, it's not just that, that they could go into another profession, but this feeling of, if I go back to school, I'm going to be incurring this debt. How did you navigate that? I know you talked about using some of the resources from pastoral ministry, but could you talk about maybe how you navigated that fear?
So I was just kind of like, listen, I got to pay for this somehow. So I did my first semester, I took out loans. But then when I saw like the breakdown of how much it would be, I was like, you know what, I can actually afford to put aside some of my money, because I am notorious for living below my means. So, and that's something that you really have to come to grips with, particularly if you're going to go into something that is a, it is a high cost in doing that education. So for psychology, it is a pretty high cost. And so I had to really stress that I'm not going to be buying a whole bunch of new clothes. I'm not going to be, I have stuff that's still, however old, whatever, years old, and I'm still wearing it. I'm like, hey, if it ain't torn, if it ain't stained, if it ain't, I'm gonna wear it. And I know that might not be the sexy, cool thing to do, but it's like, if that's what I need to do in order to get my goals, then I need to do that. And you might also need to take out loans. I pray that the next administration is going to be forgiving some loans.
Yeah, that is my prayer.
Yeah. I think that you also need to look at scholarships. You also need to look at programs, look and see what kind of programs there are, because there are lots for people who are Black. If you're a woman, if you're a first generation person, if there's lots of different avenues that you can look at. And maybe if your conference isn't as scared of success as mine was, you might have a conference that might be willing to help you out too. I mean, there's lots of avenues, but I think that you just need to explore all of them. And it is fearful. It is something that you might be afraid of, but that's when you also do that kind of cost benefit analysis, because I knew that even with whatever debt that I might incur with my loans, I knew that my potential for making more was greater than that amount of loans, that I wouldn't, on the back end, that investment up front would give me a good return on my investment.
So I want to say congratulations. You're making us proud of your accomplishment. I understand kind of how these conferences and organizations work. So I know that's a major thing. So one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking, I was thinking about this next generation coming up. That may be going to Oakwood or Southern or Washington Adventist University, that they are getting hints, right, just culturally, that ministry is pastoral ministry, right? What could be done to send signals that ministry is not only confined to the field of pastoral ministry, but ministry can be done in multiple ways. Could you talk about that?
Well, I mean, I think that the way that we talk about it needs to be different. I mean, even when I transferred from being a youth pastor at Miracle, when I went to be a chaplain at a school, there were people who were like, "Oh, why are you leaving ministry?" Like, I'm like, what? Like, chaplaincy definitely is still ministry, And I think that the way that we speak about people going into the ministry, I went to Andrews undergrad, and I remember they gave us like this little plastic card that I still have. I got it my freshman year, and it says, "It's not just a career, it's a calling." And they gave that out to everybody, not just the theology majors, not just the religion students. It was for everyone. Whatever you do is not just a career, it's a calling. And I just kept that, and I still have it. I remember that, and it's been seared into my brain that whatever you do, whatever your career path is not simply just the thing that you do to make money. It is a calling of God. And I think we need to continue to talk about it like that. And we need to not discourage people for doing things that are different, because, Adventism, we talk about pastoral ministry, but a lot of times we tell people you got to be a doctor or nurse, or you got to be a teacher, you got to be a pastor, or if you want to do music ministry, you got to sing. There's very specific things that we consider to be
we appreciate
of acceptable careers. But expanding that and helping people to see that, hey, God is so much bigger than that. And it starts from the way that we talk to our kids, the way that we talk to our churches, the way that we talk to each other.
Definitely. Well, while we have this time, I want to encourage, I see some ministers that are here. Please feel free to put some questions in the chat. We want to make sure that we hear from you. Dr. Ray, what are some resources that may be helpful for our audience here when thinking about decolonizing their minds around ministry? Are there any resources that you think would be helpful?
Well, I think that if you really want to figure out how to do that, I think you really, what I said from before, find someone who's doing what you want to do. So finding a mentor, that I think is the single biggest helpful thing that will help you to kind of see and realize, because another human being is sort of living, breathing proof that you can do it, because you could read all about it and everything like that, but it can always seem very beyond you unless you have someone that you are able to kind of touch and see and talk to and really be able to bounce ideas off of. because I think that for me, that was really one of the biggest things, because I mean, I was like, man, can I do this? And just knowing people who had done it, even people who were just a year or two at a cohort above me, who had done like their own private practice and things like that. I was like, oh, you can do that. Okay, all right. I mean, if they could do it, I could do it, and just being able to kind of tap into someone who can be a resource to you in a real way of sharing exactly what it is that are the steps that you need to do. And that was one of the first things that I did also after I graduated. I, found someone who I knew, and my brother worked at this place where he's like, oh, I know somebody who does what you say you want to do. And he set up a meeting for me, and this person took me out to lunch, and I asked, and I picked their brain. And this, I'm telling you, there is no substitute for that. There's no substitute. I cannot tell you to read a book or go on a website or look at a blog that will help you more than talking to a flesh and blood person about their steps and what they do.
Well, Dr. Ray, this was amazing. I thank you so much for your willingness to share your story, not only to share your story, but also to just authentically provide some practical steps for our audience. I see one question here by Gary Jones. If conferences were to partner with psychologists, counselors, and social workers, how would that change the trajectory of ministry?
Man, first of all, hey Gary. Gary is one of the best people I know. I love him. He was one of the members of my church, and I'm so glad that I got a chance to see it. And man, it would change so much, because I think there are so many people who are bound by mental health issues that they are ashamed to talk about. They feel like if they were just more spiritual, if they just prayed it away, they would be able to be free of these different things. But just like we have a health message that helps people to recognize that the way that we treat our bodies are important, and that if we have physical issues that we should go and seek some help, in the same way, we need to be proactive in sharing a health message that emphasizes the importance of mental health as well, because your mind is just as important as your body. And we need to really cultivate this idea that there is not any shame in getting help from somebody who knows how to help heal your mind as well. The same kinds of things that you would say to somebody who has cardiac problems and you tell them to go to a cardiologist. If somebody has psychological issues, or if they just are feeling like they are overwhelmed by just challenges, they have people who they could turn to. And if our churches really partnered with mental health professionals where we're working in tandem, it would be so awesome. One of the things that I do with churches that I do help to create mental health ministries is helping them to understand how to co-locate psychological helpers within their churches. Because when I did my internship, we did this thing of what co-location is where you have a psychologist inside like a medical center, for example. Because one of the things that physicians have found is that if they have a patient who has a psychological issue and they tell them, hey, here's the card for a psychologist, go see them, even if they're right down the street, they're not going there. But if there is a psychologist who's in that same office space, then the doctor can literally say, here, let me walk you to the psychologist and do what's called a warm handoff. And so if we actually had psychologists who were embedded inside of our congregations, inside of our churches, and there were people there stationed, and the pastor could say, this is someone who you can go to, and they could do that warm handoff. There are so many people who would not only now have the ability to see someone that they understand is trustworthy because they're connected to their church congregation, but also it would reduce the stigma that they might have for going to seek help. And so, I mean, it's so important. I think it's like it's a big vision of mine for our
Mhm.
churches to really be places where this can happen everywhere. But it takes time, little by little, baby steps.
Yeah. And I can attest to, not from a mental health perspective, but from kind of a general health perspective. I live in a small town of Moscow, Idaho, but within 8 miles of each other, there are two Adventist clinics. And just having access to a physician that I believe I can trust, right? Because of just the crossover in beliefs is amazing. Dr. Ray, thank you so much again for what you shared tonight. I just see in the chat that people have really appreciated what you shared. What we're going to do now is bring in a respondent, my good friend, Miss Chelsea Burrows, to kind of share her thoughts about what Dr. Ray shared on tonight. So we'll turn it over to you, Chelsea.
Let me just start by saying that was incredible. It was incredible. And I say that because hearing Sydney say she's freeing people tonight, it gives us who aren't your patients or your clients a glimpse into you as a mental health professional. And as a mental health professional who has a very similar story to yours, my goodness, the value that unfortunately is not constant in our churches because there's just that gap there. It's incredible. Your story is unbelievable. It was wonderful. It's wonderful to be able to hear and see yourself. Your story was able to give options to people, which is liberation. Your story is the definition of liberation. You know, it's wonderful to be able to see those things, because when you don't see yourself in communities, or if you don't see yourself in areas that are safe spaces, it's almost like those things don't exist. But my goodness, hearing you say the various things, like I said, having been there before, having gone to Oakwood, studied theology, wanted to be able to do something that God was going to be leading and guiding in terms of helping heal and liberate people, but not being sure of what that looked like. Hearing you say, you know, just because you're not doing things in a traditional sense, as a pastor, hearing you say that is just affirmation of the journey that I can't even say that I'm on right now. And I saw very many comments alluding to the exact same thing. But it's wonderful to be able to hear that. It's wonderful to be able to see that. One thing that I love about your story is that you saw a very intentional gap. There was a void that was there. There was a need. And you didn't say, well, I'm going to point to somebody else and they'll be able to fill it. No, you saw that need and you decided to fill it yourself. And you were incredibly autonomous with that desire to be able to move forward. So seeing a need and filling it in our church is a huge thing. And I'm really grateful for it. The other thing that really was interesting was you were able to do something that was helpful, and we now are able to see more of ourselves. I mean, we're looking at a female VP, a color. Women in the church is a huge thing. We're more than half the population of church, and to be able to see yourself in someone else's experience and journey, it's incredible, because it's not only liberating like we talked about, but it helps to be able to empower others that might be questioning where they are in their journey and where they could be. But knowing that somebody else has gone through that challenge before and they've been able to get to this side where you see that there are the benefits of all of it. My goodness, how encouraging is that? Like, that's needed more often than not. There's another thing that you said that was really interesting. I think especially given the Black community at large, but Adventism, when I'll even broaden it to church institutions, are not equivalent of God. Mic drop. My goodness. And the thing is, I think for so many of us, because church and religious communities have been such pillars of our community, hearing that being said is really helpful, because it's like, no, like God isn't confined to this bubble of this group of people. He can be using those that group of people, but being able to know that Adventism or church institution is not one and the same with God. So there's a bigger story, there's a bigger picture, there's a bigger God and being at work and everything. The other thing is, I love the fact that you were autonomous to be able to say that you did not want to be owned or at the behest of someone or something else. Your ministry belonged specifically to God. I think hearing and knowing that is also very encouraging. There are a couple of things that you said. There are a couple of quotes that I had to write down, and I want to be able to reshare. But you said, again, working for an institution is not the same as working for God. It's important to stick to your guns and encourage other people instead of acting as silos. Another one. This other one really got me. There's value in mental health being a part of pastoral ministry. And to your point earlier, you were saying that very many pastors, or those who function in very traditional means, wanted to be able to connect with people. Most of the issues that they were faced with or dealing with were interpersonal challenges, familial challenges, things that required someone who was a clinician, someone who had the training and education and skills to really be able to hone in and help that person go through a process of healing. And it's unfortunate, like I said earlier, that value of mental health. The brain is an organ. Being able to see the brain as an organ that also sometimes needs maintenance and a tune-up. Not seeing that is just incredible to me, because I feel like you were saying, there's not a complete means of healing unless mental health, the freeing of the mind, the liberation of the mind, and being able to equip that mind with tools to be able to help and moving forward. If that's not there, then we're not talking about full and holistic healing and whatnot. It's only in part. And God doesn't want things for us in terms of a healing experience to be just a little bit. He wants the whole thing. He wants us to have life and life abundantly. And having a means to be stifled or silenced in terms of what God would want us to be able to have, and not having that, my goodness, that's love. That's living on the ground in comparison to living within the skies and the stars. So I want to also go back and recap a couple of the tools, the very, very helpful tools that you've given us in terms of specific things that people can do based on the various steps that you said. So one thing is not letting fear keep us from going out and doing something else, doing something that God may have called us to be able to do. And I know for a lot of people, we're in a pandemic. Many people are suffering from job loss and whatnot. But if the God who created us knew that this pandemic, or knew that the challenges or whatever the situation was going to come, he knew that those things that you would need to be able to do to get you to where you need to go would be able to happen. So not being afraid of fear, being able to move forward and move past that is incredibly important. The other thing is leaving traditional pastoral ministry is not equal to leaving the call of God, leaving the church, leaving Jesus that you don't believe. My goodness, I can't tell you, Dr. Ray, how many people asked when I decided to transition into clinical social work to be able to do the same thing of helping those who have substance abuse and mental health disorders and all of these things. Why are you leaving ministry? Why are you choosing to do this? And I would always, in the same refrain, say back, but I'm meeting some of the people in those needs that would never walk into a church. They will never come here. But guess what? I have the opportunity to be able to help a person who might say, hey, by the way, I'm dealing with this situation of substance abuse, and I can't figure out why it's happening over and over again. And seems like there's no rescue, there's no escape for this situation. And I can tell them, it's funny that you say that. There was a situation with a man that I heard named Paul who was saying, man, he couldn't figure out how to get rescued either from his situation. He wanted to do certain things and he couldn't do them, and he kept on doing them over and over again. And how do we get to that next phase? And it's funny because at the end of the day, those things and those principles from the Bible, and those things and those principles that we have from our education, from clinical work we can use as very, very helpful means to be able to liberate and free people to what God really entitles and wants for us to be able to have. The other thing is, you also mentioned that we need to overcome various facts. We can't be concerned about what other people think. We have to be determined to do what God wants us to do. And there's no other way to be able to say that like that. Just be concerned with what God says, and then we can be able to move forward. The last couple of things: surround your friends and mentors with those who are like-minded. Important, because those will they'll catapult you to an area where you'll be able to have those people praying for you, have those people thinking of opportunities, have those people doing things to set you up, and then being able to pay it forward. Give somebody else who might be afraid or fearful or unsure of what to be able to do so that you can get to the next place, and you can share with them so that they can do the same thing. And then lastly, which I think is the most practical, is count the cost of the transition, because it does cost. It is important to know what it's going to take to be able to get there. I am so happy that I was able to benefit from your story. I'm so happy that I'm able to see another sister, another woman who's in ministry and not so traditional means, being able to heal and help and prosper the Black community, specifically in a way that very many don't have the privilege to be able to do so. I just want to say from my heart to yours, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Burrows. One of the things that's been nice, we've started off this summit with three powerful women to start us off with this concept of decolonizing our minds. I've been blessed so far, just hearing both of you and your summation and execution of pulling out some of those key ideas, Ms. Burrows, has been wonderful. So to the audience, if you've been blessed, please put blessed in the comments or chat section. I'm looking right now. If you've been blessed, please put in the chat section there that you've been blessed. What we're going to do now is we have Pastor Marquis Johns, who is going to talk about how we decolonize essentially our theology. A lot of us, the way in which our eschatology, as they would say, has been presented to us, it's been in such a way where it did not take into account who we are as Black people. And so I'm looking forward to hearing Pastor Johns share tonight his thoughts around decolonizing our theology. So now I'll turn it over to him.
Marquis D. Johns currently serves as conference evangelist for the Black Ministries Department of the Southeastern California Conference of Seventh-day Adventists and director of Adventist Community Services and Prison Ministries for the conference. He believes in using a liberal methodology to present a conservative theology. This methodology has proven very successful for his soul-winning efforts over the course of his ministry. He is in great demand as a speaker, and tonight he'll be speaking with us on the topic of decolonizing into service.
Thank you for having me. First and foremost, let me just shout out Doc Freeman. Superb summit here. Thus far, as you pointed out, I have a mother-in-law who is in ministry, whom I love dearly, Pastor Brenda Billingy. She even may be watching. And so to start off with powerful women, Pastor Lola Moore Johnston, Dr. Tiffany Llewellyn, and now Dr. Courtney Ray, just an exceptional lineup. And I am happy to be a part of it, as well as Chelsea Burrows. Although I'm old as Moses, her and I happen to have been in Oakwood at the same time. And she is a brilliant mind and a gift to the body of Christ. And so I'm a little bit confused here, just a tad bit, because I was under the impression that I was going to talk about decolonizing evangelism, primarily and specifically because I believe that my gifting and my skill set is in the area of evangelism. And so what I want to do is I want to talk about decolonizing evangelism. And Doc Freeman, I hope I haven't strayed too far from what you expect of me. But I want to just launch right into, if we're going to talk about decolonizing evangelism, there are several things I believe we have to ask ourselves. And the first of those is, what is colonization? Second question to me is a logical follow-up. How does one decolonize something, let alone evangelism? After answering those questions, like what is colonization, and how do we decolonize something, specifically evangelism? After we answer these two questions, ancillary questions will abound. So let us just start there and see if we can't follow this out to the conclusion suggested by the title of this presentation. I hope that everybody is tracking with me. I hope everybody is tracking with me. And if not, I'm about to get into it. So prayerfully, you'll be able to stay with the preacher. First, I got to admit that my guy, Doc Jamie Calazar, I don't know if he was watching. I thought I saw him watching a little bit earlier. Doc Jamie Calazar, he really challenged me a couple months back when he shared with me his testimony about removing white authors from his library. This happened to have coincided with the decision I had already made in late 2019 about what I would dedicate my days to reading in 2020. Every year, I kind of decide on the end of the last year what I'm going to read and what materials I will purchase and educate my mind on. And in 2019, I decided that I was going to spend my time trying to get back to my Pan-African roots. That's right. And that's because before I became Seventh-day Adventist, I would have described myself more as a Pan-African seeker than a Christian of any denomination. So therefore, my 2020, the beginning of my 45th trip around the sun, would be a return to those roots. One more shout out, forgive me. One more shout out before I get back to defining colonization. Claudia Marion Allen, another powerful woman of God. Claudia Marion Allen is the personification of student becoming teacher, because she has for years immersed herself in the study of African American literature while secretly nursing, and many didn't know that she nursed a love for theology and a not so secret love and appreciation for Black preaching. She has emerged as one of the most prominent voices in the Seventh-day Adventist Church on social justice and liberation theology. So when I need a book recommendation or 2 or 3 or 4 on those subjects, Claudia is the person I typically turn to. Little did I know the beautiful wormhole I would end up spiraling down because of these two. So again, shout out Jamie and shout out Claudia. Just had to shout out some of my peeps. Now back to colonization. Now, listen, Lola, I don't care what Noah Webster's or Oxbridge tells you. Let me deposit in your spirit something from Dr. Lynn St. Clair Darden's Scripturalizing Revelation, an African-American post-colonial reading of Empire. Now, in it, she synthesizes hers and Kwame Ture's thoughts on the subject, decolonization, to produce a definition I couldn't agree with more. She says, Kwame Ture, formerly Stokely Carmichael, a founder of the Black Power movement, commented that in an age of decolonization, the situation of Africans, listen to me, in America should be considered as a unique case of internal colonialism. Here's what he says: Black people in this country form a colony, and it is not in the interest of the colonial power to liberate them. They stand as colonial subjects in relation to the white society. Thus, institutional racism has another name: colonialism. Therefore, Ture considered liberation not only as the fight against racism and white supremacy, but also as the struggle for freedom from colonialism. But wait. Allow me to fling a little more fuel on the fire before we go any further. Ibram Kendi Lynette, Ibram Kendi blew my mind when he wrote around 1450, Prince Henry's Portugal birthed, watch this, conjoined twins. This is from Ibram Kendi's books, How to Be Anti-Racist. It's the next quote on the screen that's going to come up. Around 1450, Prince Henry's Portugal birthed conjoined twins, capitalism and racism, when it initiated the transatlantic slave trade of African people. The conjoined twins entered adulthood through native and black and Asian and white slavery and forced labor in the Americas, which powered industrial revolutions from Boston to London. So colonialism or institutional racism has a conjoined twin. Did you catch that? I said colonialism, based on what Kendi says, colonialism or institutional racism has a conjoined twin, capitalism. And you had better believe, listen to me, and you had better believe that they have a religion, evangelicalism. That's right. They have a religion. Capitalism and colonialism have a religion. They have a religion, and it's called evangelicalism. But before I unpack that bomb, let's make sure y'all don't forget that colonialism or institutional racism has a conjoined twin, capitalism. Now, we're almost there. But first, let me introduce you to Mr. Henry Parsons Crowell. Mr. Crowell, a devout Presbyterian, is distinguished for having served as president and chairman of the board of trustees of the Moody Bible Institute for 40 long years. He also donated 70% of his wealth to the Crowell Trust, a charitable foundation, quote, dedicated to the teaching and active extension of the doctrines of evangelical Christianity, according to its website. Now, while you may have never heard the name Henry Parsons Crowell, you have heard of what made him his fortune. Yeah, Crowell sold oatmeal. Yeah. Oatmeal. And not just any oatmeal, y'all. Crowell is known by business historians. This Presbyterian cat, head of Moody, he's known by business historians not only as the president and founder of Quaker Oats, but as one of the branding revolution's pioneers. He combined packaging, trademarking, and tremendous PR campaigns to transform oatmeal from a common grain into a trademarked product. What Crowell did was purchase the trademark for Quaker and then slap a picture of a Quaker on his oatmeal with a guarantee that it was not fresh, y'all, but pure. Now, you may be asking yourself, Keith, why is this important to a presentation on decolonizing evangelism? Because it was Crowell who created a set of fundamentals that any conservative of any denomination could ascribe to and use to differentiate themselves from liberals. Using the same marketing strategy he used to present his Quaker Oats as pure, he basically repackaged and promoted evangelicalism as the pure form of old-time religion. Since then, author Timothy Glauge would assert, American evangelicalism has been walking hand in hand with modern consumer capitalism. You missed it. One more time. Since he did this, Timothy Glauge, would assert American evangelicalism or American Christianity has been walking hand in hand with modern consumer capitalism, making Christianity the cultural to win of American capitalism, which means, based on our earlier assertion, colonialism or institutional racism, capitalism, and American Christianity are triplets. Therefore, when Kendi declares sexism, imperialism, ethnocentrism, and homophobia the siblings of colonialism and capitalism, please know American Christianity or evangelicalism is also part of this family. Understand, that although a trans-denominational movement, which is this is extremely important, evangelicalism is the single largest religious group in America. Now, I know you may find that hard to believe, given that they're Catholics and given that they're all, no, but look. Here is the thing, and this is how beautifully insidious Crowell's accomplishment is. You can be Reformed and be evangelical. You can be Wesleyan and be evangelical. You can be Baptist and be evangelical. You can be Pentecostal and be evangelical. You can be Methodist and you can even be, watch this, y'all, Seventh-day Adventist and be evangelical. See, American evangelicalism is a set of principles informed by capitalism's quantitative over qualitative approach, which says more is always better. More of what, you might ask? More Bible preaching plus more cross lifting plus more hymn singing equals more conversions. Just as capitalists ignore how capitalism is affecting the environment, the economy, and increasing inequality, evangelicals can ignore how its evangelism often fails to positively impact the communities its churches exist in. How those who are converted during its evangelistic thrust often see no change in their social standing or circumstances. As a matter of fact, according to Kevin Cruz's book, One Nation Under God, How Corporate America Invented Christian America, there are those who see Christianity and capitalism as inextricably intertwined, and that spreading the gospel of one requires spreading the gospel of the other. Then even go a step further as to declare, Christianity and capitalism first and foremost as soulmates. Jamar Tisby, in his Color of Compromise, captures from the writings of a former Princeton Seminary professor a message to those who would repudiate those claims in favor of a social gospel. These are the sentiments that Jamar Tisby says that a Princeton professor wants to communicate to those of us who want to be social. Oh, y'all don't want to talk about it. Okay, to those, this is what he says. This is what the Princeton professor said. To those who are crying for equality and opportunity and improved material conditions, the church repeats its divine message: you must be born again. Did you hear that? Anybody who wants to help people out of poverty, anybody who wants to educate the uneducated, anybody who wants to help the marginalized, you are not born again. You have not. Y'all listen. Okay, no. This was actually This was actually the sentiment of the most well-known. This concept of, if you want to improve material conditions, you are not born again, was the sentiment of the most well-known evangelical of the 21st century, Mr. Billy Graham. Yeah, that's right. Educated at Florida Bible Institute and Wheaton College. Listen to me, y'all. Both of those are part of the Moody Network. He was... I need to stop. Okay. Billy Graham at Wheaton College and at the Florida Bible Institute, both of which are part of the Moody Network. That's where Graham learned lessons he never forgot. He learned that despite denominational differences, do y'all hear Henry Parsons Crowell's effective marketing strategy? He believed that amongst them, there existed at the grassroots level of all American Protestantism a common denominator, Bible faith, to which an evangelist could appeal. But what I need you to know is Graham, the prince of the event-based evangelism we all copy, true to form and in line with capitalism and by default colonialism, which again is institutional racism, taught that the federal government could not be an instrument of God to bring about justice on issues such as racism. Furthermore, Graham opposed those. That's right, Lola. Graham opposed those who advocated for a social gospel that would create programs to meet the needs of the less fortunate. We have nonetheless wed ourselves to this model, his model, and in so doing, overlooked the unique plight of those disenfranchised by the federal government, pouring more resources into event-based evangelistic campaigns than into the impoverished communities we call ourselves evangelizing. What if we surveyed what's working in our Black communities, the things that civic organizations and nonprofits are doing that are having a positive positive impact in those cities with Black populations over 500,000 and incorporated them in order to reach people where they are instead of thinking that we need to bring them to where we gather. What if we had a model that took into consideration the mental health issues we face as a result of post-traumatic slave syndrome? What if we had a model that allowed us to find non-traditional methods to resource this work we have been called to do? What if we had a model that allowed us to be incarnational and relevant and that tapped into some of our heritage as people of African descent? Could we find a model that would help us have influence and a presence in the big cities with the communities that we are called to represent and with the public officials in those cities? What if we started more community centers and fewer churches where job skills and free education was offered, where we help people rebuild and or establish good credit so they could own instead of rent, where literacy was just as important as biblical literacy, where we actively participated in reducing the recidivism rate, where the health message included more than veganism and attempts were made on the part of professed Christians to turn food swamps and food deserts into places where nutritious food was not only accessible, but also affordable. And most importantly, where a conversion was measured not by a baptism, because truth be told, some of us who have been baptized may not even be converted, but where conversion was measured by how many people in previously challenging mental, psychological, physical, environmental, social, medical, intellectual, economic conditions experienced a change of attitude, emotion, or viewpoint from one of indifference, disbelief, or antagonism to one of acceptance, faith, or enthusiastic support. This happens when we rediscover the message of Jesus to his home church on a Sabbath day concerning attending to the poor, healing the brokenhearted, delivering the prisoners, and setting at liberty those that are oppressed. And I want you to know how we do all of this. We do it by doing what Jesus said in Matthew 25, 35, and 36. Give meat to the hungry and drink to the thirsty. Visit, are y'all listening to me? Clothe the naked. And so if you ask me, y'all, how do we decolonize evangelism? We do exactly what Jesus said and only what Jesus said. Thank you so much. I pray that you were blessed, and I hope that you take up this charge, those of you in pastoral ministries, to decolonize evangelism. Doc Freeman, that's it, and that's all.
My, that was, whoa. Thank you so much. Man. So I put down in my notes, what's the model? And at the end, you said the model starts with Matthew chapter 25. Is that?
Matthew 25, 35, and 36, as well as Luke chapter 4, verse 18. And Jesus gave us the model. Unfortunately, because we have transitioned into a Christianity that is corporate and by default colonial and capitalistic, we're not doing what Jesus did, because Jesus was about community, and we can't even say the word community anymore lest we be charged with being communistic. You see what I'm saying? And so what we've done is we've driven a wedge between the edicts of Jesus and erected a corporate structure that is influenced by Western colonialism and capitalism to create American Christianity, which is what evangelicalism is. And as I've shown you, there are several books you can read. As I've shown you, American evangelical Christianity is the cultural twin of colonialism and capitalism.
Wow.
So that's why we can't do what Jesus told us to do.
Well, listen, what are some of those resources that I know you said a couple books, but throw us some resources that we can go to.
Color of Compromise by Jamar Tisby, How to Be an Anti-Racist, or Stamped by Ibram Kendi. I would recommend everybody read One Nation Under God by Kevin Cruz, How American Capitalism Created American Christianity. There's also, it blew me away when I found out about Henry Parsons Crowell. And there's a book. Where does this book called? It's in my, I can't think of it right now, but I'll put it in a thing later. But it's basically how this man spent 40 years using marketing strategies to make evangelicalism great again. And he wedded to his strategy that he used to make his fortune off of oatmeal. Like literally, he was not a Quaker. Quakers have nothing and had nothing to do with Quaker oatmeal. He just bought that image, slapped it on his stuff, and literally started selling it as pure oatmeal. So he did the exact same thing with Christianity.
Wow. So when we think about evangelism, a lot of times we think about pastors preaching, right? We think about, you talked about kind of evangelism. So let's say the majority of the people that are watching right now are not in pastoral ministry, but even still, they can do evangelism. Could you talk about ways in which they can do effective, meaningful, decolonized evangelism?
See, here's the problem with that question, right? The question assumes that only the pastor should be doing that, which again is corporate Christianity, which again is capitalism, which again is colonialism, which again is institutional racism, right? Because now it tells you that you shouldn't be doing what the mandate. Where in the Bible did Jesus tell only clergy to evangelize? Let's start there. And because we subscribe to this corporate concept, this capitalistic, this colonial concept of Christianity, we are now living by the edicts and the what is it, Lola? What is it? Come on, somebody. The policies. That's it. That's the policy. See, the policies or the bylaws, right? The policies and bylaws are a part of corporate structures. Corporate structures in America are capitalistic. And so when you ask me to tell people what they can do to do decolonized events, do what Jesus said. Which one of the disciples had a degree in theology? Which one of the disciples had an MDiv? Which one of the disciples had a DMin? Or like we heard from Courtney, like we hear from Tiffany Llewellyn, they are doing evangelism. They are doing ministry. My chaplains are doing evangelism. My people who are out there just on a train telling somebody about Jesus, that's evangelism, or one form of evangelism. The other thing is, for those of you who are in public positions, or like you, like literally what you're doing right now, Doc Freeman, is evangelism. Do you have a degree from Oakwood in theology? Do you have an MDiv? Do you have a DN? No, but you're doing evangelism. You're reaching people that I couldn't reach because I'm limited to my pulpit. And so many of us are limited to our pulpits. God decided to take them all away. And so when you ask me, what can people do to do decolonized evangelism? Just tell somebody your story. Why aren't you who you used to be? Give somebody a piece of bread. Give somebody something to drink. Buy somebody a t-shirt. Give somebody some shoes. My man out there, Lord, his name is, he's going to be mad, but his ministry is called From the Soul. And he just gives out shoes.
Yeah.
He just gives out shoes. He just gives out shoes. That's evangelism.
Yeah.
Come on, y'all. Come on. All right.
Yeah. Well, the questions are coming in. They're coming in fast. So Rodney Duran said, Pastor Johns, would you say that the church now does not follow Christ's methods simply because of the thought that it does not make money?
I would say that absolutely, unequivocally, and without apology.
Whoa. Well, we'll jump there.
Listen, let me unpack it. Rodney, you notice if I want evangelistic money from the conference wants to see what? A return on that investment. That's capitalism. That's corporate, right? Jesus, let me tell you something. Jesus was an abject failure. Why? Because in his lifetime, he didn't baptize nobody. Go look at John chapter 3. Go look at John chapter 4. In John chapter 4, the Bible literally says, when the disciples were baptizing, though Jesus himself did not baptize. And so Jesus would have been an abject failure. Not only would he have been not only would he have been an abject failure there, but his 2-week evangelistic series that he never ran didn't produce any baptisms. He had to labor with the 12 disciples for 3.5 years, literally die, get back up out of the grave, and keep on telling them Negroes something because he hadn't taught them what they should be taught in 2 weeks.
Wow.
Jesus literally spent 3.5 years with these men, died, got up, and for 40 days continued teaching them. The Bible says because they yet knew not the scriptures. That's Peter. That's James. That's John. As a matter of fact, we still see elements of Peter's lack of conversion in Galatians chapter 2 and Galatians chapter 1 and Acts 15, when the Bible says Paul had to withstand him to the face because he was still a hypocrite. He was still nursing racist sentiments about Gentiles. So if we keep on measuring effectiveness by who we baptize, we're missing the mark because, again, as I pointed out, and Lola Moore, my little sister, she's on here right now, she'll tell y'all, many of us who profess to be converted, we ain't converted. So what does that say about our baptismal numbers? Particularly when you can't find the majority of the people we spend all that money trying to baptize.
Well, Sean Arthur asks, how do we form community partnerships to do the type of ministry you have described tonight, Pastor John?
See, this is why Courtney set y'all free tonight, right? You can't do it, Sean. You know why you can't do it? Because the brainwashing that we have been subjected to tells us we can't take money from the government.
Yep.
So you can't start a community center. And Sean, my man, Sean, I already know. Sean do work. Don't get it chopped. Right? We can't take money from the government, and that's what they inundate us with. But guess what? Loma Linda get money from the government. That's why they got Coke machines in there. Right? Because we supposed to preach and teach a health message that says don't imbibe caffeine. But why is there caffeine then in our various hospitals? Because we taking government money. But we running around down here thinking we can't take government money to go into the communities in Chicago, in Detroit, in New York, in Philadelphia, and affect positive change in the area of not getting somebody to keep coming to our church. Listen, I pastored in Philadelphia for 3 years. And Courtney was also speaking my language, so she talked about people trying to malign your ministry, but we'll leave that alone, right? I pastored in Philadelphia for 3 years, y'all, for 3 years. And my wife one day saw somebody writing a $5 tithe check. Why is that? Because Philadelphia, while it is the 5th largest city in the nation with the 4th largest concentration of African Americans, is the poorest per capita city of the most populous metropolitans in America, right? Mm-hmm. So what do you expect from these people? One Sabbath, and those of us who have sat at the feet of Dr. Bird, we do stuff like this. We say, okay, I want on my desk the giving records from this week, right? And so my treasurer comes and she puts Sydney the giving from that week, right? And I look at it, I go, oh, this is awful. She says, well, I could make it worse. I said, impossible. She said, yeah, you and your wife account for 1/4 of that. But yet, we got these churches in these cities with these people in them who can't read, who are in debt, who can't get a job, who don't know how to work Microsoft Office, they don't know how to do any of this stuff. But yet we in there telling them it's money in the pews. And if you're faithful to the Lord, He's going to open up the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing. But we aren't doing anything to change their economic and social standing.
Yeah. Man, there's so much I think about that right now, because I know that there's been this whole talk about even our tithing system, the way that we have it set up is broken. Is messed up. Yeah. But we got another question. Why does the SDA Church not have a physical mission that serves the homeless and underprivileged communities by providing housing, mental health, addiction recovery, and life coaching?
Because SDAs in practice are also evangelical. Therefore, we're capitalistic, right? Wow. Homeless people don't make us money. They're not quality baptisms. We don't care. We want quantity. We need a bunch of people getting in the pool, right? We don't see them as quality baptisms because, Neasley, they don't make 6 figures. And so they're not going to increase our bottom line. So we're not going to pour resources into that. We're going to pour resources into the people that are going to get us numbers so that we can run around saying, look what we've done. Look at what we've done. Look at what we've done. Look at what we've done. And we're confusing activity with productivity. And so the reason why we don't have an active homeless ministry is because homeless people don't tithe.
So I'm sorry. So Purple Chef says, how do you take government funds and be subject to the regulations and still do what we need to while upholding our personal beliefs. And I see this, I kind of see this with schools, with church schools.
That's what I'm gonna say. That's what I'm about to say. Right? We didn't make this distinction when you got that federal loan that you hoping Biden is gonna forgive, did you? Why we now got to differentiate whether I can take out a loan from the government to help people who can't go to school, who too illiterate to go to school, who don't have clothes to go to school. But I just took out a loan and I'm praying and I'm praying and I'm hoping and I'm praying for total debt forgiveness, or I'm willing to settle for the $50,000 Biden and Kamala might give, or the $20,000 or the $10,000. But I'm not, and that's going to all come from the government. Why aren't we decrying government funds when it's for, and here it is, Sydney, Sydney, this is where it is. Because we are capitalistic. I don't mind going into debt for me, so that I can pull myself up by the bootstraps. Mm-hmm. That's why.
So you're pushing me to think about something that Dr. Pastor Jamie Calazar wrote in his book.
That's my man.
He talks about this concept of a theology of public policy, right? Mm-hmm. And essentially, he says that we believe as Adventists and a lot of Christendom, we believe in a theology of charity, but not a theology of public policy. Could you talk about how we could possibly do evangelism in such a way that we get to the root of some of these issues, not just putting Band-Aids on our community's issues?
More of us are going to have to follow Dr. Courtney Ray. More of us are going to have to follow Dr. Courtney Ray. More of us are going to have to follow individuals, because there was something very poignant in what she said. She said she was asked, what if we don't share your view about helping people recover mentally, when Jesus said, help liberate the oppressed? You can be oppressed mentally. You can be oppressed emotionally. You can be oppressed psychologically. And being able to decipher the DSM-5 is the same thing like being able to decipher the Bible, so that we can help Black people who suffer from post-traumatic slave syndrome to get better mentally, because as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's what the Bible says. The Bible doesn't say be transformed by the putting on of different clothes and long sleeves and eating vegan meals. The Bible says be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so how is it we don't want to see people? All of the conferences say that. No, we're not going to equip you to leave us. Because they don't see what we do outside of preaching in the pulpits as ministry, or as viable alternatives to ministry. Wow. And so, that's that. I mean, Doc, the thing is, here's the thing, Doc Freeman, it ain't deep. It ain't complicated. We just don't want to say it.
Yeah. So there's one last question here. Can you speak to the affinity that Christianity has with foreign Blacks, i.e. missions to Africa versus mission to indigenous Blacks, or ADOS, or African Americans? Pookie and Ray Ray.
Because if I help Pookie, listen, you got to understand. Let me tell y'all something. Billy Graham was the advisor to Dwight Eisenhower. Dwight Eisenhower and his predecessors empowered J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover and them steered COINTELPRO during the Red Scare and McCarthyism. Are y'all listening to me? When McCarthyism and the Red Scare ceased to exist, the COINTELPRO turned its attention to another group, and it targeted specifically, quote, the Black Messiah type. Killed Fred Hampton, killed Malcolm X, killed Martin Luther King, killed Medgar Evers. Why? Because they were teaching Black liberation. And that's why I read to you from Dr. Lynn Darden's book about Kwame Ture saying, listen, they don't stand to gain by seeing us liberated. And should we be liberated, we're going to take what's ours. As long as I'm doing, and I can say, look, I'm over there helping them. I'm over there helping them. But we're the people who have built this country. But we are, if you look at the quote, what was the quote I said about, let me find it in my own presentation so I can read it. Let me find it. Where is it at? Here it is. This is from Stokely Carmichael. It says, Kwame Ture, formerly Stokely Carmichael, a founder of the Black Power movement, commented that in an age of decolonization, this is the answer to your question, bro. In the age of decolonization, the situation of Africans in America should be considered as a unique case of internal colonialism. Black people in this country form a colony, and it is not in the interest of the colonial power to liberate them. They stand as colonial subjects in relation to the white society. Thus, institutional racism has another name, colonialism. Therefore, Courtney Ray continues, liberation is not only a fight against racism and white supremacy, but also as the struggle for freedom from colonialism. We get free, there's problems. Right? Listen, here's the thing. Back in the early, early history, when y'all don't know this because y'all think Abraham Lincoln is a great emancipator. Abraham Lincoln said he didn't want to see us free. It was just politically advantageous, right? Because where would they put us on the continent? See, let me help you understand something. And listen, I don't want to activate the ACLU. I don't want to get anybody that's of Jewish on my back. But here is the truth. It was financially and politically advantageous for them to put Zionists in Palestine because Halliburton and Republicans had designs on oil. It is not politically and financially advantageous to liberate Black people in America because if I get back to South Africa, I want my diamond mines. If I get back to Africa, I want my platinum mines. If I get back to Africa, I want my gold mines. If I get back there, the De Beers got to go.
Right.
Gotta go. So they can't.
And now we got the knowledge. To take advantage of that.
Yeah, they don't want that.
So let me add this. So I'm thinking about what I'm doing at my university. I teach at the University of Idaho, and some of the language that we were putting in for our new student, our Black Cultural Center, and we're looking at hiring a director for that center. I embedded language like justice and liberation. When when the leadership saw that, they said, "Listen, we love the whole proposal. We want to see it go through, but that language of justice and liberation, I don't think it's going to get through legal counsel."
Yeah, because they understand very well, Doc Freeman. You can't say this. You got to keep your job. They understand, and they created dog whistle politics, and Black people don't understand. When you're talking about starting the liberation movement, what is your problem, Sydney? See, they understand when we say things like liberation, when we say things like decolonization, they speak dog whistle very, very clearly. And understand that people think that a dog whistle it operates at a level that humans can't hear it. No, it irritates dogs.
Ooh.
And so when the dog whistle is blown and you start saying liberation, you start saying justice, you start saying reparations, you start saying and they start. Let me stop before I get everybody in trouble. Love you, bro. Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for what you shared tonight, man. It's been wonderful. Let's bring on Chelsea. I want to make sure Chelsea can jump in.
Hold on, one second too. And Kurt told me I had to show this. Legalize being Black, y'all. Kurt said I needed to show that. Legalize being Black, y'all.
Chelsea, the floor is yours, Chelsea.
Listen. Okay. First off, you're terrible. Okay.
Yes.
Listen, you don't get all the hand claps because. Okay.
Yes.
You started and was like, we're not going 0 to 60 in 6 seconds. No. We are starting and going 0 to 120 in 3 seconds. Wow.
Yeah, I preach with a sense of urgency, you know. I gotta get it out before they kill me.
When you started by saying you removed all the white authors from your library.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, we about to be in for something.
Yeah, but and Chelsea, I'm sorry. That's Kate, and I had to shout out Jamie. That's Jamie. I was on the phone with Jamie. Same thing, Chelsea. Like, I was like, you did what? Yeah.
But I mean, think about it. So I remember having recently gone to Cuba. I went twice last year. And when I was there, I had the best experience of going there. I know we have a certain mindset of certain places that we've never been before. You know, but when I was
mhm.
there, I was able to interact with individuals who have significant African roots, okay, to be able to get some history, because history is important.
Yes, it
And
is.
there were a number of things that they talked with us about that as we were listening, I questioned, but I had to remember that the lady who was the tour guide said, Chelsea, you have to remember the source. You got to
Mm,
know the source of who's saying what they're saying and what agenda might be behind what they're saying.
right,
So to
right.
your point, when you talk about Christianity and capitalism in the United States or the Americas as having a very similar agenda, I got to consider the source.
Yeah,
Didn't
Mm.
even think about it.
yeah.
It didn't cross my mind. But I do remember when we were at Oakwood and Dr. Sepulveda taught the second half of Christian history after Dr. Barham. He started by telling us that, African, there you go,
That's
there you go.
it.
Christianity did not start for those of African descent or Africans when we happened to arrive by choice to the Americas. Because if that was the case, then how did the Ethiopians start reading Isaiah? Like, how did
Exactly,
he get his hands on that?
exactly.
Like, come on, there has to be a story before to be able to allude to the events that happened later. But you made a couple of points, and it's interesting that the evangelicals of this nation are choosing to be able to go in ways that don't seem to align with our Christ. Let me just start by saying that. Let's just start there. Because
Yeah.
if certain things, like you were saying, if we just did what Jesus said, we would have very different outcomes, specifically from those who claim to be the followers of Christ. Because quite frankly, people who look like me, when we talk about we build this joint for free, we would have very different experiences over the last, 300-400 years. But you said something as well in terms of we have to use what already works within our communities. Why are we trying to reinvent the wheel? There are people who have set things apart to be able to take care of what's going on. It's like, okay, why are we trying to do this again? This doesn't make any sense. So saying that and doing that is definitely important. You talked about text that I have to go back and look at myself. Matthew 25, 35 and 36. Am I right with that? Because you said it so fast, I'm not even sure if that was right. Oh, it was right? Okay, cool. I promise. And then the other one was Luke 34, verse 18. Lastly, I'm going to need you to put every
Luke
one of
four
them.
eighteen.
Sorry, say it again.
Luke 4:18.
Luke 4:18. Okay, I'm glad to be able to have that correction. Lastly, I'm holding to the fire. I need every one of those books. You have to because you were like color of compromise. And I'm like, whoa. You need to say that again, because when people have knowledge to be able to put those things in terms of theory into practice, like that's liberation. That's liberation. That's what we're about. So I listen.
We'll definitely, if he gives us that list, we'll definitely add it to our webpage so people can have access to it.
Awesome. Awesome. But yeah, I feel like I'm still trying to slow down from the shock of the fast race that we were just on. But yeah.
Well, while you're doing that, Dr. Ray, there was a question for you that we weren't able to address earlier by Rodney Duran, and so he asked the question: how would you present your important message to the youth of today in order for it to be well received by them? I see many youth not really applying this message at this important time.
Well, I think that we need to change the culture for our youth, change the culture in the way that from our pulpits, what we're preaching, change the mindset of the parents who work with our young people. Because if you have parents who are discouraged, remember we were talking about the fact that there are these certain categories of acceptable things that we say that Adventist kids can go and major in. If we only have parents who are telling their children that these are the things that they need to go into, then that's what their children are going to do, because they might feel like they can't break out of that mold. And all the stuff that Marquis was talking about, just the whole idea of the patterns that we have replicated, because those were the patterns that we have seen, and we just adopt those things and we perpetuate those things. All of the negative things that have been established from before, we take those and we just regurgitate them back and continue to perpetuate them for generation after generation. And so we're not going to see a change in our children unless we intentionally break the cycle of all of the things that we have been taught and all of the things that we continue to say is the way that it has to be. Because unless we are doing things like educating ourselves to know that
Mm-hmm.
this isn't the way that it needs to be, then we're just going to continue to teach our children those same things. And they're going to continue to do those same things. And then we're going to say, oh, well, how come the youth aren't doing anything different? Well, that's because we're not teaching them any differently. We're not exemplifying anything differently for them. And so they're not going to do anything different unless they can see that we are also encouraging them to think differently as well. And I just really am just so grateful for just the history lesson
Yeah. Yeah.
that Pastor Johns is able to give. Because honestly, so much of what we do, I mean, you just hit on evangelism, but just so much of our theology is
Mm.
altogether just additions from things that we have just adopted from
Mm-hmm.
bad sources. Like RCC, we talk about how they sold indulgences to obtain salvation and all that kind of stuff. We're doing the exact same thing. We're telling people that the only way that they can be saved is to come into our church, and we might not be selling indulgences, but we're doing it in the same way, in the same kinds of, trading salvation for membership, trading salvation for your
Wow.
tithe, trading the assurance of salvation for your allegiance to our denomination. And we're doing this, we're replicating those same kinds of things. And just like you talked about, we are just doing that in a way that we're selling it as Christianity, but really it's just capitalism repackaged, you know?
This was powerful. I want to thank each of you for um, this just wonderful presentation. Yeah, this is. Listen, if you guys have enjoyed tonight, um, just put in the chat again. Blessed. Just put that in the chat again, man. I was truly blessed from it. Just from earlier today, just talking about how you don't necessarily have to be in pastoral ministry to do ministry, but also now connecting that with how we can even as laypersons do evangelism differently, and what that looks like, and how we can decolonize the way we think about evangelism is so important. Tomorrow we have someone from the continent, Pastor Mapunga. So we had to track him down, but we got him. And we reached out to him yesterday, and he says that he's excited to be with us. So we'll have him, and then he's going to talk about decolonizing our minds as it relates to the African continent and just Seventh-day Adventism across the continent. And then we're going to also have Minister Ronnie Vanderhorst. And the last time he was on our platform, he messed us up with talking about sovereignty and what sovereignty would look like. And so we're just going to free him to just define sovereignty and say what sovereignty will look like for the future of Black America and the diaspora. So thank you guys so much. I want to encourage you to invite others to be a part of the program on tomorrow. Share this link. Share this link with your family and friends. It's going to take place at a different time tomorrow. It's going to take place at 5:00. It's going to be taking place at 5:00 p.m. At Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. So make sure that you're here. I would encourage you to please check us out on my platform. It is drsidneyfreemanjr.com. drsidneyfreemanjr.com. Also, please, please, please join our community that we're building on Facebook. You can go to my public Facebook page, facebook.com/Sidney Freeman Jr. And then you'll see our group, and the group's name is the Liberation Movement Community. So the Liberation Movement Community. We thank you so much for spending time with us. I'm going to ask if we could bring Pastor Marquis Johns back to, if he wouldn't mind helping us close us out with prayer.
Let's pray. God, our liberator, thank you for what you deposited in our spirits today. Dr. Courtney Ray liberated those of us in pastoral ministries. And God, I pray that I did my part to just give us a different take on evangelism. Thank you for the insight and input of Chelsea. And thank you for the mind behind this particular ministry, Dr. Sidney Freeman Jr. Lord, I pray that those who heard will heed and continue to do everything that we can to liberate ourselves, first beginning at our minds. In Jesus' name, amen.
Before we leave, I just want to say thank you to Kirk Nugent and his wonderful work that he's done on this platform to behind the scenes. Yes. And I also always want to thank my beautiful wife, Dr. Linda Freeman, for all that she's doing in the background. Have a blessed Sabbath and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Good night.